Basic banking. In this part, we are trying to understand how can the bank work. First of all, the concept of asset transformation we have dealt with in chapter 2. We said that the banks make profits by selling securities to the savers with risk characteristics they are comfortable with, and in turn use the acquired fund in order to purchase a diversified portfolio of assets whose returns are not moving together in order to earn on them. Or simply, we said that the bank can make profits by selling liabilities with one set of characteristics concerning the liquidity, the size, the risk, the return, and use the proceeds to purchase assets with different set of characteristics. Here we are saying a certain concept which is banks borrow short and lend long, which means that the banks borrow short, takes short-term sources of fund and use them to make long-term assets or long-term loans. Here we are going to repeat the concept T account. T account, it is a simplified balance sheet listing only the changes that occur in the balance sheet items starting for some initial balance sheet position. يعني أنا عندي التي أكاونت هو شكله زي التي letter T، بحط فيه الرايت هاند سايد اللايبيليتيز والليفت هاند سايد الأسيتس. أي ترانزاكشن بيحصل تغيير فيها بتغير أي شيء جوه الأسيتس واللايبيليتيز I'm going to register the changes that occur in my balance sheet item. بليز يا شباب البارت ده starting من السلايد دي لو سمحتوا كل واحد فيكم يكون معاه ورقة وقلم علشان يفهم معايا احنا هنعمل ايه او هنسجل ازاي المعاملات جوه التي اكاونت. Understand the asset transformation or how the banks can borrow short and lend long. You must keep in your mind that the bank must produce desirable services at low cost and earns substantial income on its assets. Otherwise, the bank will suffer losses. To understand the idea, please bring a paper and pencil and write with me what I'm going to tell you. For simplicity, we are assuming here that Russia, أنا مثلا أهو Russia for example, heard about the First National Bank that it provides excellent services and she decided to open a checkable deposit account at that bank. So, once I put the $100 as a checkable deposit, it appears in the liabilities as sources of fund entered to the bank. So, there will be in the assets of the bank in bold cash in the bank with $100 to be registered in the T account of the bank. So, the liabilities equal $100 and reserves will increase by $100. Here, keep in your mind that an increase that opening a checking account leading to an increase in the bank's reserves equal to the increase in the checkable deposits. Again, once Russia opened a checking account, that led to an increase in the bank's reserves with $100, which is equal to the increase in the checkable deposits. So, you must keep that in your mind. Here is the way. There is another way to open a checkable deposit. Let us see in the next slide. Another way to open a checkable deposit in the First National Bank is through depositing a check with the same value in the First National Bank. يعني here in our example السلايد اللي فاتت يا شباب أنا assumed إن رشا قررت إنها تفتح account تعمل checkable deposit at the First National Bank بقيمة $100 كانوا معاها كاش فراحت سلمتهم للبنك. فأوتوماتيك العملية دي اتسجلت إنه في liabilities اتسجلت فيها checkable deposits ب 100 وظهرت as reserves ب 100 في الأسس. assuming إني أنا رشا وقررت إني أنا I'm going to open a checkable deposit in the First National Bank بس أنا مش معايا ال 100 دول كاش. أنا معايا تشيك بقيمة 100. التشيك ده كاتبهولي أحمد والتشيك دوت كاتبهولي أحمد وأحمد ده الأكاونت بتاعته موجودة في السكند ناشونال بانك. يبقى في الحالة دي أنا بروح للفيرست ناشونال بانك وبقول له I am going to deposit التشيك ده، وإني أنا عايزة الفيرست ناشونال بانك يحصل التشيك ده من السكند ناشونال بانك وبالقيمة بتاعته يفتح لي تشيكبل ديبوزيت في الفيرست ناشونال بانك. يبقى here is the case in once I am going to take a check written on another account, okay, and I deposit that check to the First National Bank, so it will enter the T account as $100 cash items in the process of collection. لأن احنا اتفقنا إن دي سيولة قيد التحصيل، هو لسه دي ما أخدهاش. And they appears in the liabilities as $100 checkable deposits. ليه اتسجلت بالشكل ده؟ نركز مع بعض. This asset for the First National Bank is entered in the T account as cash items in the process of collection because the First National Bank will now try to collect the funds that is owed. طب هعمل ازاي بقى؟ إما إن First National Bank could go directly to the Second National Bank and ask for payments of the funds, but it would be a problem if the two banks are in separate governorates. So it would consume time and it will cost more. Instead, the First National Bank deposits the check in its account at the central bank, and the central bank collects the fund from the Second National Bank. يعني أنا هسلم الشيك للسنترال بانك، والسنترال بانك بنفسه يحول لي الفلوس من حسابات السكند ناشونال بانك اللي موجودة عند السنترال بانك لحساباتي أنا اللي موجودة عند السنترال بانك. So the net result is that in the central bank will transfer 100 of reserves from the second national bank to the first national bank, and the final balance sheet will occur as follows. لو بصينا للسكند ناشونال بانك هنلاحظ انه liabilities هتقل ب 100 checkable deposits. ده طبيعي انهم هياخدوا من الاكونت بتاع احمد اللي كتب لي التشيك $100 هيخصموه من الcheckable deposits بتاعته، يبقى عشان كده مسجلينها checkable deposits negative 100. وفي نفس الوقت ده معناه انه الريزيرفز will decline بقيمة ال 100. عشان كده في السكند ناشونال بانك اللايبيليتيز negative $100 checkable deposits والاسيتس negative 100 reserves، لان دول اتسحبوا من السكند ناشونال بانك وتحولوا لمين؟ للفيرست ناشونال بانك. سو هيظهروا ازاي بقى في الفيرست ناشونال بانك؟ في الفيرست ناشونال بانك هنلاقي ان اللايبيليتيز اللي هي checkable deposits اللي هي متسجله ب 100 هتظهر قيمتها بقى as reserves ب 100. هنا خلي بالكم الفرق بين اللي فوق وتحت ايه؟ ان فوق كانوا متسجلين cash items in the process of collection because they are not yet collected. Once they are transferred from the accounts of the second national bank to the accounts of the first national bank, it appears as reserves 100. So here, keep in your mind that when a check is written on an account at one bank is deposited in another bank, the bank receiving the deposit gains reserves equal to the amount of the check, while the bank on which the check is written sees its reserves fall by the same amount. يعني here in our example, a check is written on an account at the second national bank, and this check is deposited in the first national bank. So the bank receiving the deposit, which is the first national bank, gains reserves equal to the amount of the check, which is 100. While the bank on which the check is written, اللي هو second national bank, sees its reserves falling by $100. So when a bank receives additional deposits, it gains an equal amount of reserves, but when it loses deposits, it loses an equal amount of reserves. Now the question is how the bank can use the 100 checkable deposits to make profit. First of all, before this, I must keep the required reserve as the first national bank. We said that according to the law by the regulations of the central bank, a certain percentage of the checkable deposits must be kept as required reserves in the central bank. Assuming that the required reserve ratio is 10%, it means that 10% out of the checkable deposits must be kept as a required reserves, which is $10. And the remaining $90 are registered in the T account as excess reserves. If the bank doesn't do anything more than this, it will suffer from great losses. Why is that? Because keeping the checkable deposits is costly, as the bank must keep records pay tellers, pay for check clearing. So the reserves earn little interest or earn no interest. The bank is taking a loss. The situation would be even worse if the bank makes interest payment on the deposits. As we said, there are part of the checkable deposits which we call the interest-bearing deposits, which earn a little interest. So what is the case now? The bank must make profits. In order to do this, the bank must put a productive use for all or part of the $90 of excess reserves available in the bank. One way to do this is either by investing in purchasing securities or making loans. So the registration in the balance sheet will change to be liabilities by 100 checkable deposits, the required reserves $10, and loans with $90. Here the bank must avoid the asymmetric information problems of adverse selection and moral hazard we have discussed earlier, so it takes steps to reduce the risk. Bank loan officers always evaluate potential borrowers using what we call the 5 C's. The 5 C's are the character, capacity, collateral, conditions, capital, in order to reduce the problems of asymmetric information before they agree to lend. يعني أنا كبنك قررت إن أنا خلاص I'm going to use الextra or excess reserves بال $90 in making loans. I must look carefully for the potential borrowers وبعمل تحليل بنسميه 5 C's لأن كلهم بالletter C. I'm evaluating the potential borrowers using the 5 C's concerning the character of the potential borrower, the capacity, the collateral الضمانة, the conditions, the capital, in order to reduce the asymmetric information as possible. Here بقى نبقى واضح قدامنا ازاي البنك بيعمل الاسset transformation. انا هنا كبنك I'm selling liabilities with one set of characteristics اللي هي مين؟ checkable deposits. ليها risk characteristics desirable و acceptable من receivers. Then I'm going to use the proceeds to purchase assets with a different set of characteristics or give loans. That's why we are saying the bank borrows short and lends long. It borrows short because it borrows checkable deposits ودي short term لأنها payable on demand at any time. But it uses the proceeds in order to make long loans because loans are considered long term. After we have some idea of how a bank operates, let us look at how a bank manages its assets and liabilities in order to earn the highest possible profit. As a bank manager, I have main concerns. First of all, I must engage in what we call a liquidity management, which means that I must be sure that the bank has enough ready cash to pay its depositors when there are deposit outflows. So I must acquire enough liquid assets to meet my obligations. The second thing is that I must engage in what we call asset management, إدارة للأصول. It means that as a bank manager, I must have low level of risk by acquiring assets that have a low rate of default, and this is happened by diversifying asset holdings. This is what we call the asset management. The third concern is that as a bank manager, I must engage in acquiring funds at very low cost, which is the liability management. And also there is what we call the capital adequacy management. It means that the bank manager must decide the amount of capital the bank should maintain and then acquire the needed capital وده اللي بنسميه معدل كفاية رأس المال. There are other types of risk that must be managed, like the credit risk management. The credit risk management means the risk arising because borrowers may default. There is a probability that the borrowers may be unable to pay the interest payment or pay back the value of the loan. So I must keep on my mind how to meet this kind of risk. Also, there is the interest rate risk to be managed, which means the riskiness of earnings and returns on bank assets caused by the interest rate changes, and we see how the bank calculate what we call the gap analysis and the duration analysis in order to managing the interest rate risk. First of all, in order to understand the liquidity management and the role of reserves، ازاي بعمل إدارة للسيولة، how إني أنا كبانك مانجر لازم أتأكد إن أنا عندي enough liquid assets to meet my obligations to the depositors when there is a deposit outflow. خلينا نقارن كده بين وضعين، وضع لو أنا عندي excess reserves ووضع لو I have no excess reserves. لو سمحتوا يا شباب وانتوا معايا في البارت ده زي ما بأكد تاني يبقى معاك ورقة وقلم، ولو سمحتوا سجلوا معايا اللي احنا بنعمله دوت بإيدك عشان تفهم احنا بنعمل ايه. أول كيس هنا for example احنا assuming ان ده الانيشال بالانس شيت للفيرست ناشونال بانك for example، ان البنك عنده liabilities فيها الديبوزيتس $100 مليون وعنده كابيتال ب $10 مليون. أما بالنسبة للأسيتس فعنده reserves of $20 مليون وعنده loans ب $80 مليون وسكيورتيز ب $10 مليون. طبعا مش محتاجة أأكد عليكم تاني إن لازم التوتال assets equal التوتال liabilities، لازم يكون عندي kind of balance. أمال إحنا مسمينه balance ليه؟ طيب here if we are assuming that the required reserve ratio is 10%، it means that in the required reserves هتساوي كام؟ هتساوي 10% out of the deposits 100 million which means 10 million required reserves. يبقى ده معناها إنه في الانيشال كيس اللي عندي البنك من ال 20 million reserves only 10 million is required reserves، لكن ال rest 10 million is considered as excess reserves. assuming that إنه حصل deposit outflow بقيمة 10 million، حصل إن في حد بقى له account سحب منه 10 million أو كتب شيكس على الأكاونتس بتاعته ب 10 million، يبقى هنا النيو بالانس شيت بقى اللي في الرايت هاند سايد اللي حصل فيها إنه liabilities الديبوزيتس قلت ب 10 مليون، اتسحب 10 مليون فأصبحت الديبوزيتس دلوقتي $90 مليون، والكابيتال بانك as it is 10 مليون. هنا بقى في الاسيتس اللونز as it is والسكيورتيز زي ما هما، اللي هيتغير الريزيرفز ان انا دفعت الاكسس ريزيرفز دول اللي اتدفعوا اللي خرجوا من الاسيتس بتاعتي، وتبقى عندي ال 10 مليون اللي هما required reserve. يبقى ما حصلش عندي اي مشكله. ليه؟ لانه لما حصل deposit outflow أنا كان عندي excess reserve، فقدرت إني أنا to meet my obligations without making any changes in other parts of my balance sheet. عشان كده بنقول إنه if the bank has ample excess reserves, a deposit outflow doesn't necessitate changes in other parts of its balance sheet. يعني ببساطة طول ما أنا كبنك عندي احتياطيات إضافية، أي deposit outflow مش هيستطلب مني إني أنا أعمل أي تغيرات في أجزاء البالانس شيت بتاعتي، لا أنا بسحب من الإكسس ريزيرفز الموجودة عندي. طيب تفتكروا بقى يا ولاد هتبقى نفس الكيس زي ما هي كده في حالة إن أنا from the beginning كان ما عنديش إكسس ريزيرفز؟ لا طبعا القصة هتكون مختلفة. تعالوا نشوف مع بعض. تعالوا نشوف بقى لو اتغير الحال عما كان عليه. يعني احنا السلايد اللي فاتت افترضنا اني انا كبنك من البداية كان عندي 10 مليون excess reserves، وبالتالي لما حصل عندي deposit outflow ب 10 مليون I'm taking them from my excess reserves وما حصلش عندي اي تغيرات في الباقي اجزاء البالانس شيت. طيب now let's assume ان البنك بتاعي كانت الانيشال بالانس شيت بتاعته as follows، ان انا عندي deposits ب 100 مليون دولار وعندي capital ب 10 مليون، والاسيتس بتاعتي عندي reserves only 10 مليون which is the required reserves زي ما اتفقنا لان required reserve ratio ب 10%، وبقيه الفلوس دي انا حطيتها في لونز. يعني لو تتذكروا في السلايد اللي فاتت احنا كنا مفترضين ان اللونز ب 80 والسكيورتيز ب 10 مليون، فكان عندي excess reserves ب 10 مليون. لو انا قررت لا ان انا عايزه اشغل ال 10 مليون الاكسس ريزيرفز دي فحطيتها في شكل لونز، فاللونز عندي اصبحت 90 مليون والسكيورتيز 10 مليون. يبقى here is the case ان انا I'm only keeping the required reserve ratio which is 10 million. If there is a deposit outflow by 10 million, what would be the case for the bank? Let's look at the right hand side. طبعا عندي اللايبيليتيز ان الديبوزيتس هتقل ب 10 مليون، فاصبحت الديبوزيتس عندي 90 مليون دولار والبنك كابيتال ب 10 مليون. طيب اخدت ال 10 مليون دول منين؟ في الاسيتس من الريزيرفز، فاصبحت عندي ريزيرفز equal 0 واللونز والسكيورتيز as they are. هنا ال reserves are considered as a legal requirement set by the central bank, so this shortfall must be eliminated in order to have the required reserves. Comparing to the previous case, excess reserves can be considered as insurance against the costs associated with the deposit outflows. In the first case, we don't meet any problems because we withdraw the value of the deposit outflow from the excess reserves. But now we withdraw all the reserves that must be covered. What will be the solution? How to keep the required reserve with 10 million at my account. هنا يا ولاد علشان تبقوا فاهمين احنا بنعمل ايه، احنا ببساطة عايزين نشوف اني انا لو كان بنك مانجر ازاي بعمل ادارة للسيولة، ازاي to be sure ان انا عندي enough liquid assets to meet my obligations. احنا بنقارن بين وضعين. الوضع الاولاني شفنا لو حصل انا عندي اي obligations او اي withdrawal من الديبوزيتس بتاعتي وكان عندي excess reserves، ففي الحالة دي انا عملت obligations without need to make any necessary changes in the balance sheet. What would be the case بقى لو أنا ما كانش عندي excess reserves؟ طب لو أنا مش متوفر عندي excess reserves، أنا موظفة كل ال reserves اللي عندي ومحتفظة فقط بال required reserve. لو حصل أي deposit outflow this means that إن أنا reserves عندي أصبحت zero زي الحالة اللي فاتت. لكن اتفقنا إن ال reserves دي legal requirement لازم أحتفظ بيها، ما ينفعش يبقى عندي reserves equal zero. يبقى this shortfall must be eliminated. How to do this؟ أنا عندي 4 basic options. The first option is to borrow. I can borrow from other banks in the system or from other corporations. طبعا احنا متفقين ان borrowing from other banks اللي احنا سميناها قبل كده ال interbank operations او سميناها ال federal fund operations اللي هي overnight loans between banks. في الاكزامبل بتاعنا انا المفروض عندي الديبوزيتس 90 مليون، يبقى انا لو افترضت ان انا I must keep required reserve منها ب 10%، لو required reserve ratio 10%, it means that in the required reserves equal 9 million. ال 9 million دول أنا ممكن أوفرهم إزاي بقى في الحالة دي؟ through borrowing from other banks. عشان كده هنلاحظ عندنا إنه في البنك balance sheet ظاهر عندي في liabilities deposits ب 90 مليون دولار والborrowing هنا from other banks or corporations ب 9 مليون والبنك كابيتال ب 10 مليون. وال 9 مليون اللي ظهروا عندي كسورس اوف فند انا حطيتهم في الاسيتس عندي في الريزيرفز ال 9 مليون اللي هي ريكوايرد ريزيرفز. يبقى انا كده حليت المشكله بتاعتي ان انا في البالانس شيت بتاعي كان عندي ريزيرفز ايكوال 0، انا وفرت الريكوايرد ريزيرفز المطلوبه مني through borrowing from other banks. السؤال بقى اللي بيطرح نفسه، هل الاوبشن دوت ملوش كوست؟ Of course it has a cost. The cost of such activity is the interest rate on these borrowings. يعني لو أنا if I am borrowing from other banks أنا هدفع ال interbank rate أو ال federal fund rate. طب what about I'm borrowing from other corporations? There would be a cost for borrowing. يبقى إذا أول option بالنسبة لي لو أنا ما عنديش excess reserve إن أنا ممكن أحل مشكلتي through borrowing from other banks or from other corporations، ولكن السولوشن ده له cost، ما كنتش أنا متحملة الكوست دي in case إن أنا هيكون عندي excess reserves. The second option لو حصل عندي deposit outflow وأصبحت reserves عندي بزيرو، إن أنا I can sell part of my securities. أبيع جزء من السكيورتيز اللي عندي. يعني here for our example أنا محتاجة required reserves ب 9 million, so I sell part of my securities كانت ب 10 million زي ما احنا شايفين أصبحت مسجلة ب 1 million فقط، لأن ال 9 million دول أنا بعتهم علشان أوفر إن يكون في عندي reserves. طيب here في الحالة دي ما عنديش أي cost. of course أنا عندي فيه cost. ايه الكوست بقى الموجودة في selling some securities؟ The cost of selling securities is the brokerage and other transaction costs. اوكي؟ لأن احنا عارفين طبعا ان انا to sell securities it may take time and some effort. حتى لو انا كان عندي بعض securities في شكل treasury bills they are highly traded زي ما احنا عارفين، وبالتالي ما عنديش فيها كوست عالية، فدي هيكون شيء لطيف وده كأوبشن بتفضله كتير من البنوك. but لو أنا ما عنديش treasury bills ال other securities I'm holding are less liquid وال transaction cost بتاعتهم could be very high. يبقى ال second option بالنسبة لي to meet my obligations إن أنا يكون عندي required reserves ب 9 million إن أنا وفرتهم من خلال selling part of my securities. هل الكوست أنا في كوست هنا بتحملها؟ أيوة أنا بتحمل الكوست متمثلة في البروكريج كوست والترانزاكشن كوست لأنها it might take some effort to some time in order to sell them. Okay? The third option for meeting a deposit outflow, I can acquire my reserves by borrowing from the central bank itself. اللي هي في الإكزامبل عندنا في الكتاب borrowing from the Fed itself. Here لو بصينا كده للبالانس شيت هنلاحظ إن عندي الديبوزيتس 90 مليون، وعلشان أوفر في الأسيتس reserves ب 9 مليون اللي هي required reserves I am borrowing from the Fed. فظهر عندي ال borrowing from the Fed as a source of fund ب 9 مليون. طبعا borrowing from the central bank أو borrowing from the Fed low cost طبعا إن أنا بدفع ال interest rate paid on the loans اللي احنا بنسميها discount rate سعر الخصم. اوكي يبقى low cost. وفي كوست تانية بقى عايزاكم تخلوا بالكم منها اني انا لما بقترض من السنترال بانك خلي بالكم too frequent borrowing from the central bank may restrict my ability to borrow in the future. لاني انا كده بظهر قدام السنترال بانك اني انا مش ملتزمة او مش عارفة اعمل ادارة كويسة للليكويديتي عندي. يعني borrowing from the central bank في interest payment okay which is the discount rate. But keep in your mind that too much borrowing it might restrict your ability to borrow in the future. يعني لو انت بنك وعمال بتاخد قروض discount loans من السنترال بانك ده معناها ان السنترال بانك ممكن يعمل restrictions على اللونز في الفيوتشر لان هو شايف ان انت مش عارف تعمل مانجنج كويس للليكويديتي عندك في البنك. لذلك كأوبشن borrowing from the central bank لو خدتوا بالكم احنا ما حطيناهوش في بداية الحلول. يعني احنا لما بنفكر في الاوبشنز بنفكر من حيث اقلها ضررا لاكثرها ضررا. اقلها ضررا زي ما شفنا ان انا borrowing from other banks or corporations or selling part of my securities. The third option is to borrow from the central bank. But many banks don't prefer to do such a solution. ليه؟ لأنه beside the discount rate اللي هي الكوست اللي أنا بتحملها too frequent borrowing from the central bank may restrict the ability of the bank in the future to borrow, which is not desirable. The fourth option to acquire the 9 million of reserves to meet the deposit obligations is by reducing the loans by this amount. Okay? How to reduce the loan هنفهمه معناه ايه، بس نشوف كده على البالانس شيت لو اخدتوا بالكم الحل اللي انا عملته اني انا simply في الاسيتس زي ما هو ظاهر عندنا الريزيرفز عشان اوفر ال 9 مليون required reserve I'm reducing the amount of loans من 90 ل 81 millions والسكيورتيز ب 10 مليون واللايبيليتيز والبانك كابيتال التوتال بتاعهم 100 فعندي التوتال assets equal التوتال liabilities. Keep in your mind that reduction of loans is the most costly way of acquiring reserves. How to reduce a loan? طبعا احنا عارفين اني انا كبنك ممكن يكون عندي short term loans. ال short term loans دي بيحصل لها renewing at fairly short term intervals. يعني ممكن القروض دي بتكون قصيرة الأجل وقابلة للتجديد. ف I can reduce my loan خلاص by calling in loans. Calling in loans يعني معناها ان انا I'm stop renewing them when they come due. بمعنى اني انا simply كده ببساطة انا عندي مجموعة من القروض في ليها اجل قصير والمفروض انها بتجدد كل فترة. فاجي عند فترة العميل المفروض بيجدد القرض وبياخد مني دفعة اقول له لا ستوب بقى انا مش هعمل تجديد للقرض وكفى بذلك. طبعا هنا الاوبشن ده بنسميه call in loans. اوكي call in loans as a bank, I has huge number of short-term loans renewed at fairly short intervals. I can reduce its total amount, okay, quickly by calling in loans, which means I am not renewing some loans when they come due. This option is as if I am antagonizing the customers whose loans are not being renewed because they haven't done anything to deserve such a treatment. It's a kind of punishment, as if I am punishing my customers as they haven't done anything to stop dealing with them and to treat them such a way. So in the future, of course, they will take their business elsewhere in the future, so it's a very costly consequence for the bank. That's why it's not preferred to call in loans. يبقى ده كأوبشن call in loans عشان أقلل اللونز بتاعتي كأوبشن إني أوفر الريزيرفز، إني أنا أتوقف عن تجديد الديون قصيرة الأجل. يبقى as if I am antagonizing الكاستمرز، كأني بعاقبهم لأنه الكاستمر ما عملش أي حاجة عشان يتعامل المعاملة دي. طب أنا كده كبنك بخسر سمعتي ليه؟ لأنه التصرف المنطقي من العميل إنه هيحول كل البيزنس وكل الريليشنز بتاعته من البنك بتاعي لأي بنك تاني، فكده أنا كبنك الكوست اللي أنا بتحملها في الحالة دي هي سمعتي. Another way to reduce loans، اوكي، اني انا بعمل اوبشن تاني بقى بنسميه selling the loans for another banks. يعني ايه؟ يعني الطريقة التانية ان انا ابص لللونز بتاعتي و I sell them off to other banks. This is very costly بقى. ليه؟ Because other banks do not know how risky these loans are. So they may not be willing to buy the loans at their full value. اوكي، فدي كوست كبيره بالنسبه لي. يعني الطريقه الثانيه عشان اقلل القروض ان انا ممكن ابيعها لبنك تاني، ابيع الدين بتاعي لبنك تاني، يعني انا اقول له خد مني اشتري مني الديون دي وهو بقى اللي يتعامل مع العملاء. طب ايه المشكله؟ المشكله ان البنك التاني مش هو اللي عمل الدراسه بتاعه القرض ومش هو اللي عمل ال5 سيز زي ما اتفقنا، وبالتالي ممكن البنك التاني ده لما يجي يشتري مني اللون ما يشتريهاش بكامل قيمتها، يشتريها بقيمه اقل. فدي بالنسبة لي كوست أنا بتحملها، وهو محق في ذلك لأن البنك التاني ده مش عارف إلى أي مدى القروض دي فيها درجة من المخاطرة. خلاص؟ يبقى إذا أنا عندي في ال reduction of loans they are considered the most costly way of acquiring reserves، لأنه سواء أنا عملتها بأي من الطريقتين، لو أنا عملت calling in loans it's a kind of antagonizing the customers and they will withdraw all their business to other banks in the future. Or even لو أنا عملت بالأوبشن التاني to sell off loans, other banks may only agree to purchase them at a substantial discount, which will cost the bank a lot. That's why reducing loan is considered the last resort the bank can think of in order to meet its obligation. Okay? يبقى هنا مهم جدا بقى نركز مع بعض. احنا أخدنا بالنا إيه بقى في اللي احنا قلناه، الكونكلوجن كده اللي نخرج منه. احنا شفنا من خلال لو أنا كبنك عندي excess reserve it serves as a caution against the costs associated with the deposit outflow. ليه؟ لأنه simply كده لو البنك hold no excess reserve يبقى في الحالة دي to meet its obligation في الحالة دي البنك هيتحمل cost. الكوست دي إما تكون في شكل borrowing from other banks or corporations، okay، أو borrowing from the central bank أو selling securities أو calling in or selling off loans، وكل option من الoptions دي فيه high cost associated with it. Okay? The higher the cost associated with the deposit outflow, the more excess reserves a bank will want to hold. فأنا كبنك بقى أنا عايزة أعمل إيه؟ أنا عايزة يبقى عندي excess reserves to meet my obligation. But keep in your mind بقى نقطة ودي هنجيلها بعد كده، إنه holding ال excess reserve في حد ذاته low cost في opportunity cost. إيه هي؟ إنه simply لو أنا عندي excess reserve في opportunity cost which is the earnings foregone by not holding income earning assets such as loans or securities to ensure against losses due to deposit outflow. ان انا simply علشان أأمن نفسي ضد المخاطر او ضد ان انا ألجأ لأي من الفور اوبشنز انا برضو بتحمل تضحية، لانه keeping الاكسس ريزيرفز انا بضحي ليه؟ لان في تكلفة فرصة بديلة، لانه الاكسس ريزيرفز دي لو انا كنت وظفتها في اي اوبشن تاني ان انا ادي بيها لونز او اشتري بيها سيكيورتيز كانت هتحقق لي انكم، فكأني انا في عائد بضحي بيه مقابل احتفاظي بالاكسس ريزيرفز. اوكي، علشان كده بقى في بعض البنوك عشان يعمل كايند اوف بالانس، بعض البنوك بريفيرد ان يكون عندها بارت من الاسيتس more liquid securities اللي هي سميناها secondary reserves اللي هي التريجري bills، عشان ما تحطش نفسها في المشكلة دي. After finishing the liquidity management, now we are starting to study the asset management. My purpose here as a bank manager is to maximize the profits. So I must seek simultaneously three goals. I must seek the highest possible returns on loans and securities, and at the same time reducing risk and having adequate liquidity. Okay? يعني أنا كبنك مانجر عشان أحقق البروفيتس أنا عايزة أحقق 3 أهداف بس في نفس الوقت. في الوقت اللي أنا بدور فيه على ال highest possible return on loans and securities لازم أحاول إن أنا to reduce الريسك، مش أرمي نفسي في المخاطر. بلس إن أنا يكون عندي enough liquid assets عشان ما أحطش نفسي في البروبلمز اللي اتكلمنا عليها وإحنا بنتكلم عن ال liquidity management. How to achieve this? How to achieve these 3 goals? Let us see. In order to achieve the 3 goals simultaneously, banks accomplish these goals through 4 main tools. First of all, as a bank, I must try to find borrowers who will pay high interest rate and at the same time they have low possibility of default. It means that as a bank officer, I must decide if the potential borrowers are good credit risk who will make the interest payment and the principal payments on time or not. يعني بلغة تانية يا شباب زي اللي احنا اخدناها في chapter 2 اني انا as a bank I am engaging in screening to reduce the adverse selection problem. Okay? Usually banks are conservative in their loan policies, that's why the default rate is usually less than 1%. But it's very important that the bank shouldn't be so conservative that the bank might miss out an attractive lending opportunity that earn high interest rate. Okay? يبقى first of all, I must seek for the potential borrowers with high possibility of paying high interest rates and at the same time low possibility of default. The second way is to purchase securities with high returns and low risk. It's very important. The third option for me is to lower the risk by diversifying both assets and loans. Banks must attempt to lower the risk by diversifying. I can achieve this by purchasing many different types of assets. They are different in their type, in their maturity, in their risk, and approving many types of loans to variety of customers. خلي بالكم يا شباب إن لو أنا كبنك ما عنديش الدايفرسيفيكيشن بتبقى في مشكلة مهمة. For example مثلا البانكس اللي كانوا over specialized in making loans للenergy companies أو real estate developers أو farmers, they suffered from huge losses in the 1980s with the slump in the energy and property and farm prices. So many of these banks went broke because they زي ما قلنا كده they had put many eggs in one basket. ما عملوش diversification. يبقى it's very important as a tool for the bank to manage the assets إن أنا I'm trying to lower the risk by diversifying both assets and loans. Finally, the bank must manage the liquidity of its asset so that it can meet deposits outflow and at the same time still satisfy its reserve requirements without bearing too much costs. It means that it will hold liquid securities even if they earn a somehow lower return than other assets. But again, it's not wise for any bank to be too conservative. يعني I'm trying to make a kind of balance. أنا بعمل كبنك balance between my desire for liquidity against the benefits of the increased earnings that can be obtained from less liquid assets like loans. Okay يا شباب؟ يبقى هنا it won't be wise for the bank to be too conservative. if it avoids all the costs associated with the deposit outflow by holding only excess reserves, it will suffer from losses because reserves earn no interest, while the bank liabilities are costly to maintain. So, in order to achieve the three goals, I must find potential borrowers who will pay high interest rate and at the same time they have lower possibility of default. I must purchase securities with high returns and low risk. I'm trying to decreasing the risk by diversifying both my assets and loans. I'm trying to make a kind of balance between the need for liquidity against the benefits of the increased return from less liquid assets. The liability management. In the past, most banks took their liabilities as fixed, and they spent their effort trying to achieve an optimal mix of assets. Why is that? Because of two main reasons. First of all, banks' funds were obtained mainly through checkable deposits that by law couldn't pay any interest. That's why banks couldn't actively compete with each other for these deposits by paying interest on them. يعني هم اصلا كان معظم الفند اللي بياخدوه اللايبيليتي الاساسي بتاعتهم ان هم يعملوا checkable deposit. والcheckable deposit by the law at that time ما بتدفعش اي interest. فhow to compete between them؟ مش هيبقى في بينهم competition. So we can say that انه ال amount was effectively given for any individual bank. ال amount of checkable deposits كانت بتعتبر given لأي individual bank. هو وحظه بقى. ليه؟ لأن مفيش مجال للتنافس فيما بينهم. يبقى ده سبب ليه بالنسبة لهم كانت ال liabilities fixed. The other reason is that because the markets for making overnight loans between banks were not well developed, so banks rarely borrowed from each others in order to meet the reserve needs. But starting from 1960s بقى أصبحت ال liability management is considered as a recent phenomenon due to the rise of the money center banks or the large banks that began to explore ways in which the liabilities on their balance sheet could provide them with reserves and liquidity. Also, there is a huge expansion of the overnight loan markets and the new financial instruments like the negotiable certificate of deposits. This new flexibility in the liability management meant that the banks could no longer need on checkable deposit as the primary source of funds, and as a result, it's no longer treated their sources as given. No, they set target goals for their asset growth and tried to acquire funds by issuing liabilities as they were needed. تمام يا شباب؟ يعني في الجزئية دي ان هو يعني اللي انا يهمني ان انتوا تبقوا فاهمينه ان احنا liability management دي is considered as a recent phenomena. في الاول كنا بنتعامل او البنوك كانت بتتعامل مع اللايبيليتي بتاعتها على انها given. ليه؟ لانها simply او mainly كانت بتعتمد على الcheckable deposits والcheckable deposits by the law pay no interest، وبالتالي انا كبنك ما عنديش امكانيه ان انا اتنافس مع البنوك التانية علشان ازود الcheckable deposits اللي عندي، فكل بنك بقى حصته بتعتبر given بالنسبه له في الcheckable deposits اللي فتحت عنده. وفي نفس الوقت ما كانش فيه نمو بقى لعمليات الفيدرال فاند ماركت او عمليات الانتربانك اوبريشنز اللي هي الاوفرنايت لونز. Recently بقى starting from the 1960s بدأت تظهر فكرة liability management، وده نتيجة انه بدأت تنشأ بنوك كبيرة يعني اللي احنا بنسميها money center banks. خلاص الماني center banks دي بدأت تدور بقى وتعمل explore لطرق جديدة تقدر انها تقدم بيها او تدير بيها liabilities بتاعتها. وفي نفس الوقت بدأ ينمو عندي الفيدرال فاند ماركت او الانتربانك operations، وبدأ يتقدم new financial instruments زي certificate of deposits. بدأت تظهر بقى types تانية من liabilities other than checkable deposit. وبالتالي checkable deposits بقى الامبورتنس بتاعتها have decreased as a source of bank funds، واصبح في sources or other sources of fund زي ما شفنا مع بعض. يعني لو رجعتوا للسكيدول اللي احنا ناقشناه لو تلاحظوا هتلاحظوا انه اللارج percentage في liabilities of the bank كانت في non transaction deposits. اللي هي mainly التايم والسيفنج ديبوزيتس، لكن الوزن النسبي للتشيكابل ديبوزيتس أصبح أقل. Here is the class activity. Rank the following bank assets from the most to least liquid. Commercial loans, securities, reserves, physical capital. خلي بالكوا أنا هنا عايزة أعمل ranking from the most to the least liquid. احنا عارفين طبعا liquidity it is the ease and speed with which the asset can be transferred into cash. هنا يعتبر مين الموست liquid؟ طبعا أكيد الريزيرفز لأنها itself is a cash، يبقى reserves is the first place. Then securities because they can sold in the market وفيها transaction cost بسيطة اللي هي البروكريج. Then the commercial loans وفاينلي الفيزيكال كابيتال. طبعا الكوميرشال لونز لانها ليها ماتيوريتي لايف تايم which will be repaid، لكن اخر حاجه الفيزيكال كابيتال بقى اللي هي الاصول الاساسيه بتاعه البنك اللي احنا اتفقنا عليها اللي هي بقى البيلدينج والاكويبمنت وغيرها. يبقى ranking those assets from the most to the least liquid is first reserves, then securities, then commercial loans, and at the last the physical capital. Why might a bank be willing to borrow funds from other banks at a higher rate than the rate at which it can borrow from the central bank? Think ليه أنا كبنك لو أنا عايزة أعمل borrowing ليه هفضل أعمل borrowing from other banks at higher rate compared to the rate which is less for borrowing from the central bank? We said that if the bank borrows too frequently from the central bank may restrict its ability to borrow in the future. That's why I prefer to borrow from other banks paying higher interest rates or higher interbank rate compared to paying lower discount rate in order not to be restricted in the future. If the bank you own has the following balance sheet, okay, اللي أنا عندي فيها liabilities deposits 500 million, bank capital 100 million, while the assets فيها reserves 75 million والloans 525 million. If the bank suffers a deposit outflow of 50 million with a required reserve ratio on deposits of 10%, what actions should you take? Try to write it down with me. Here the liabilities of the bank, the deposits will be 450 million because there is a deposit outflow with 50. So the liabilities will be deposits 450 million, bank capital 100 million. On the other side, the assets, the reserves will be 25 million because I have to pay 50 million as a deposit outflow, and the loans will be 525 million. What is the problem here? The problem is that the required reserve ratio equal 10%. 10% of my new deposits, 450 million, means that I have to put required reserve of 45 million, while my reserves equal only 25. So there is a shortfall of 20 million. This shortfall must be eliminated. How is that? The bank can think of several actions. First of all, the bank can borrow from other banks interbank loans with 20 million, and it will appear in the side of liabilities borrowing from other banks in order to get 20 million to make the reserves equal 45 million. The other option is to sell securities, but here I don't have this option. The third option is to borrow from the central bank. I can borrow from the central bank discount loans with 20 million. And the last option is to reduce loans by calling in loans or selling off loans. Or I can make a solution as a combination of those options. Here, the 50 million deposit outflow means that the reserves fall by 50 million to 25 million. Since the required reserves are 45 million as a 10% of the 450 million of deposits, your bank needs to acquire 20 million of reserves. The bank could obtain these reserves by either borrowing 20 million in discount loans from the central bank, or borrowing the 20 million from other banks or corporations, or selling 20 million of securities, or calling in or selling off 20 million of loans as a last option, or some combination of all of these. طبعا يا شباب انا يعني الحل ده انتوا ممكن تسجلوه على البالانس شيت نفسها. طبعا الاوبشن بتاع selling securities مش هنحققه هنا لانه في الاكزامبل اللي هو مديهولي انا ما كانش عندي في البالانس شيت securities، بس انا بقول لك ده in case ان كان عندك securities زي ما اخدنا. واللاست ريزورت اللي انا ممكن الجا له هو اني انا calling in or selling off 25 million of loans، لان زي ما اتفقنا انا هنا بخسر سمعتي كبنك. او ممكن اعمل combination which means that ان انا ممكن اخد مثلا ب 10 million discount loans وال 10 million التانيين اخد بيهم مثلا interbank loans and so on. طبعا مش محتاجة أأكد عليكم إن كل option من دول فيه cost متضمنة فيه. If I am borrowing from the central bank يعني discount loans I have to pay the discount rate، ولازم to keep in mind إن too frequent borrowing from the central bank might restrict my ability to borrow in the future. تاني حاجة أخلي بالي لو أنا هعمل borrowing from other banks اللي هي interbank loans ده معناها إن أنا هتحمل cost اللي هي interbank rate، فدي cost أنا هدفعها. لو انا عملت الاوبشن بقى الخاص بالcalling in loans يبقى انا كده I am antagonizing my customers, they will withdraw all their business in the future out of my bank. او لو انا عملت selling off لللونز ممكن ال other banks might estimate the loans with at a discount يقدروا بأقل من قيمته. ففي cost associated with each option. انا لازم ادي لنفسي priority. ال first option borrowing from other banks or corporations، لو كان عندي securities هيكون ال second option to sell part of my securities، ال third option to borrow from the central bank، with the last resort calling in loans or selling off loans. If the bank you own has no excess reserves and a sound customer comes in asking for a loan, should you automatically turn the customer down explaining that you don't have any excess reserves to lend out? Why or why not? What options are available that will enable you to provide the funds your customer needs? First of all, of course, no, I will never turn down the customer even if the bank has no excess reserves. Why? Because if I did so, it means that I am losing the customer's business forever, which is extremely costly. Instead, I can search for other options to get enough reserves to be able to make the loan for the customer. For example, the bank could think of borrowing from other banks or corporations, or borrowing from the central bank, or it could sell part of its securities or negotiable CDs in order to be able to acquire the necessary funds. But the option to turn down the customer is forbidden at all.